We're excited to be joined by Mike Berardino, Notre Dame beat writer for the South Bend Tribune and ndinsider.com. He's also a co-host of the Pod of Gold podcast, where they talk all things Fighting Irish. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, excited to talk some Notre Dame football, of course, and a big-time program coming off of a big-time season. So fun to kind of look at what they're going to be like in 2025. And before we kind of dive into the team here, I want to get your thoughts on this USC rivalry, because we recently had a guest, Alicia De Artola, on the podcast. She covers USC. You got her insights on the reports of this USC Notre Dame rivalry that could potentially be in jeopardy. She kind of gave us the USC perspective. What are your sources telling you from the Notre Dame side of things?
Quiet around here publicly and privately because this is an ongoing thing. It's fluid, but I have no reason at this point to doubt the reporting that's been out there from a few different locations. Sounds like more talk out of the USC side here lately that it's not that classic rivalry that from all indications should go on. Fans want to see it go on. I think the media sees the value in it. I think the administrators in both places, it almost feels like it's a Lincoln Riley to-do list item alone. And, who knows even how long Lincoln Riley is going to be there. He may just be passing through. No one from the Notre Dame side wants to see that thing end. So I'm sure there's a compromise to be made. Maybe the season ender aspect of it, or the October, November aspect of it, it gets changed and it does move up to early in the year. Notre Dame's not averse to starting off with a real tough opener. They did it with A&M last year. They're doing it again this year with Miami on the road both times. So there's a way to salvage this thing, and certainly it would be a tragedy for tradition for whoever the coach is to be one individually passing through. I understand the Big Ten aspect. I understand the air miles that USC is getting used to having to wedge into a season. Notre Dame's used to that. Notre Dame's used to being coast to coast, playing on both coasts, playing overseas in the same season. That they need to be able to work this out. I hope if they have to go year to year for now, the next couple of years, at least through 26, which would be the centennial, and then find a way to work it out. Obviously, a lot of moving parts with the college football playoff, and everyone wants to make sure they have access to it and that they're well positioned to do so. You don't know if you're a Big Ten member, if you're sitting on 4 guaranteed, the top 4 getting to go, or if it's this 5 plus 11 possibility. They're making it up as they go.
So we know that Notre Dame sits in this unique space, right, as an independent, but they're not just any independent. They are the independent, right? You would call them the Yankees of college football or the Cowboys of college football, however you want to look at them in terms of how they stand alone. From your perspective, what is the likelihood at some point, let's just say within the next 5 to 10 years, with the way that college football is going, that Notre Dame would join a conference? And obviously that would only be 2 conferences. It'd either be the SEC or the Big Ten. And obviously the SEC is Southern, but with the way college football is set up now, it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter what state you're in. They just pull you in wherever they pull you in.
You never say never, but that one, as it evolves, it just keeps rolling toward Notre Dame. The sands are shifting constantly, but Notre Dame's footing remains as strong as ever. And it's been great timing that Marcus Freeman has come along and has stayed put and is now signed through the decade, through 2030. NBC agreement, which for all the home games of Notre Dame coverage, is extended through the decade. They have all cylinders firing. There's no panic here. The very fact that the latest incarnation and on the fly again for the 2025 college football playoff, making it possible for Notre Dame to get in and have a first round bye if it's one of the top 4 in the college football playoff ranking. So Jack Swarbrick's no longer the athletic director here, but he helped create this system and passed on the AD keys to Pete Bavacqua, who came from Notre Dame. You see where these things all just keep connecting. I don't see it. I don't see Notre Dame making that move to a conference, regardless of what it is. The Big Ten, all those ill feelings go back more than a century. It has nothing to do with that. I know the ACC is in danger, but you saw what Notre Dame did with Clemson here, extending that agreement out. So at least you have that, and I think you'll see something, companion piece. Whether USC finds its way out of that series or not, it does feel like a companion piece with one of the Florida schools in the ACC, Florida State or Miami, makes sense too, to extend that long term. So it would have to be almost a desperation move for Notre Dame to come off of that independence. There'd have to be economic reasons. There'd have to be championship access, playoff reasons. There'd have to be some sense that recruits, they're not going to call the shots, but that the idea that the talent flow would only be sustained by a move to a conference. I don't see any of that. I'm having a hard time, no matter how much I squint, seeing that. Well, who knows? Does private equity take over everything? And then, you have to answer to them. I did ask Pete Bavacqua that question about private equity and would Notre Dame ever be interested in pairing up with a given entity. There's certainly a number of them that have Notre Dame ties through their education past. I mean, the Mendoza School of Business turns out people who know how to become billionaires. But he said flat out in December, at the time of the announcement of the Freeman extension, they were not interested. Notre Dame's not interested in becoming part of a pairing up with a private equity firm, selling off access to its revenue streams in that way. But so many moving parts. That's one of them, guys, that I just don't. Like I say, I'd have to, no matter how hard I squint, and I don't think I'm alone in this, and those who cover Notre Dame these days, really hard to see a day when Notre Dame is not an independent in the short, medium term. Long term, however you define it, decade from now, 2 decades from now, we'll just be happy to still be alive at that point.
Now, to kind of combine what you just said there and jump back a bit, what would the financial implications of possibly losing a rivalry like USC? I know we talk about the tradition and the fans and whatnot, but are they big financial implications involved with losing a marquee game like that for Notre Dame?
Well, obviously, I don't know that it's something that would be insurmountable. They've already worked to make sure they want to preserve the value of that NBC contract for the home schedule. That's going to have to remain, stout. Last year's home schedule was a little shaky to the point where, we wondered after the Northern Illinois loss if there would be enough juice on the remaining schedule to get into the playoff as a one-loss team. I'm sure NBC, if it were to lose an every other year chance to show a Notre Dame USC matchup, which some are, and when you face the abyss like this, when you consider something with that much history to it ending within the next 2 seasons, 25 or 26, everyone kind of takes stock of things, and it's a fair question. But the value as far as making sure the NBC was satisfied first with the home schedule, with the every other year, this Clemson being guaranteed on there every other year. Now make up for it, possibly. There's still a gap there, a great gap in terms of historical significance and total national championships and Heismans. Other than that, I don't think it's anything that would move the meter for Notre Dame to worry about, say, finding an opponent that would make sure that home game was a sellout. I don't think they'd worry about, the one thing you'd think about would be making sure you played in Southern California every other year. Notre Dame recruits so well in Southern California, some of the top players on the current team, especially on defense, from USC land. And obviously we're high priorities in recruiting for USC. I could see a scenario where Lincoln Riley, and I don't know this to be a fact, we don't, he's just spoken very rarely about it. I think last time at the Big Ten meetings, we see those quotes, but you could see a scenario where if you're going to dig in your heels from a USC perspective with Chad Bowden there, by the way, now as general manager, having come from Notre Dame and knowing fully what it was like to pull talent like Kingston Viliamu-Asa and Madden Faremo out of USC territory, and junior Tui Halamaka. You could see a scenario where USC would be like, we don't really want to allow the players leaving finish second on these 5-star, 4-star guys, maybe finish first a little more if they don't know for a fact they're going to come home and play in the Coliseum in a gold helmet twice in their careers. So that would be a silly reason, in my estimation, to kill a rivalry with a century's worth of history. But you could see a guy in self-preservation mode who's struggling to stay relevant with his program, to maybe he would think in those short-term modes. That would be foolish, but that they're not asking me for a ruling on it. Financially alone was your question. I would think NBC would be the prime one that would be most interested. And of course, then ABC, ESPN with the one out there. typically, but then CBS as well at times. So I think as long as NBC's happy, Notre Dame's happy.
I want to move to the recruiting side, and I know we were just talking briefly about recruiting, but I'll say this, and I know there's had to been perhaps a lot of talk around town with this year's recruiting class coming, obviously having Elijah Barres and then Jerome Bettis Jr. Is there excitement? I know they're just names, obviously Jerome Bettis being an alum of Notre Dame. Like, is there excitement brewing around this class coming in this year?
You're talking about the guys that will, the class of 2025, the current signing class? Yeah.
Correct.
The guys, yeah, we got a chance to see a number of them this spring. About a dozen of them were here for early enrollment. Yeah, they have a guy like Jadon Blair, another NFL progeny, and with at safety. They're looking for the next versions of Kyle Hamilton and Xavier Watts. It won't be immediate for him because he's going to have to learn from a guy like Adon Schuler. He's impressive right out of the gate, 6'4", still growing. Bettis is a guy with he's going to have to, there's not a great expectation. He's going to have to work through the fact that his dad was his namesake.
Right.
But I think that he's in the right place to max out whatever he can provide as a receiver. Yes, Elijah Burris had an impressive spring. Some problems with drops here and there. When we didn't see a ton of spring practice. That was by design, by the program's design, that the media was at a distance. But we saw ability to take the top off the defense. He did that a few times in scrimmage scenarios. But this has been a trend here for a while. They did lose Brian Urlacher's son, Kennedy, to USC in the portal. But the idea of NFL dads wanting their kids to come and play at Notre Dame, that was the scenario under Brian Kelly. To an extent, it's really accelerated under Marcus Freeman and a staff that at all times has some NFL presence to it among the assistants, and I don't see that tailing off. They showed last year, and in recent years, it's been a trend as well, that if you show up here and you're ready to go, Ben Morrison got to do it in 22, and he didn't enroll until June. You don't necessarily have to be an early enrollee to make a first-year impact. And Brian Young's son last year was really making strides throughout the year, and he will, from day one, be a game wrecker on the D-line as a pass rusher. That's just to name a few. It's been to the point where when Bill Belichick took the job at North Carolina, my alma mater, and Mike Lombardi goes there, and there was this talk, right? They tried to rebrand a program that had again fallen under Mac Brown to some irrelevance. The idea that, well, for those who want to go off to the NFL, and the idea that this will get you ready for the NFL. Notre Dame's had more NFL draftees than anybody through the years, and Notre Dame's currently seems to be the program of choice for those who have played in the NFL and have kids who wish to do the same. So North Carolina, I don't think Belichick flashing the rings, even to the point where Notre Dame's going into North Carolina effectively the last few years, pre and post Belichick hiring, and pulling as good of prospects as they have there at a variety of positions, D-line included. So, and Jadon Blair from North Carolina. So, yeah, this thing is in a good spot right now.
So I want to stick with recruiting just for a sec, because currently, according to 24/7 Sports, Notre Dame has the number 2 ranked recruiting class for 2026. That's pretty impressive considering the academic standards that school holds. How has Marcus Freeman and the staff managed to pull this off and still compete at an elite recruiting level?
Well, I think one of the first things he did, even as a defensive coordinator in 21 under Brian Kelly, was aim high and be a straight shooter, and don't run away from the challenges of the classroom, of the weather, of the schedule, of the talent around you. And so choose hard very quickly became a hashtag when Marcus Freeman becomes head coach, and it remains the hallmark, I'm sure, on the recruiting trail. They want these guys to know up front what they're signing up for, It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be sunny very often. And it's in the classroom, you are going to be challenged and you're not going to get a free pass there. So all those things viewed glass half full. This goes back to the Brian Kelly era. They talked about 4 for 40. Well, it's this, put in four hard years now and you're set up for 40 to go. Other programs around the country have a right to make similar claims. But what the key here is there's no excuses being made, and they don't take themselves. What I've seen, the biggest change perhaps in the last few years, recruiting target-wise, is Notre Dame's not taking itself out of the mix preemptively and just assuming a 4 or 5 star from a southern area, Texas, Georgia, might not be interested here. They're going for it. They're taking it to its logical extent. Marcus Freeman will say one of the best things is that, they've uncapped the number of visits you can make. Obviously, there's some limit to it. You have a time constraints, but he's just fine with the idea of if they can just get any prospect to campus, show them what it's like, get them with the academic counselors, let them meet professors, let them see what they have in their football facility. Have as good an indoor facility as you'll have in the country. You have a facility that's under construction that will open in 2026, which is going to take what the Guglielmino complex is, which is as upper echelon, and apparently everything will be there for rest and recovery and academic side and anything you can imagine, strength and conditioning, nutrition. They're cutting edge on everything that you could imagine, and they'll go beyond that. For all we know, they're working on something AI right now. They've AI'd their way into the 2028 playoff. We didn't realize it. So bottom line is, if they can get them here, they have great confidence that their offer will not fall on deaf ears. And then Marcus Freeman, being the lead recruiter, he said it at the beginning, and he's held up to it. He's going to be a guy who's hyper involved, texting these guys during the times when you can do that, getting on the phone when you can do that. Can't imagine anybody out there does a better home visit than these guys, because they're just personable. Freeman only brings in relentless recruiters, and they lose Adila McCullough to the NFL. Great running backs coach with the Super Bowl ring to prove it. He goes now with the Raiders, and then they bring in Jaywan Sider from Penn State, who had brought in that two-headed monster and had been there, that remains at Penn State. And now he's doing the same thing. He's found the next generation of double-barreled 1,000-yard potential. And oh, by the way, he gets to coach Love and Price this year. So, and he's an excellent recruiter. He's the associate head coach. So that's how they do it.
Any thought process around, and I knew you alluded to it earlier, like when you were talking about how UNC, obviously they have Mike Lombardi as their football, air quotes, football GM, with the way that college football is going to with the NIL, because there's two ways of looking at the NIL, right? There's the NIL where it's capped at and you can have your 20 million, but then there's still the outside faction that's working, which I think in a sense like this probably works a little bit more to Notre Dame's advantage given their illustrious alum, right? There's a very few schools that have a level of alum like how Notre Dame does have. Is there any thought process around the way that football is moving that you actually have the advantage? And I know Brad spoke about the academic standard that Notre Dame likes to uphold, which is fine and which is great, but it's not like there's a lot of kids out here that are smart enough to get into Notre Dame on their own without football, but smart enough that they play football, that are 4 and 5 stars, that can get into Notre Dame, that says, okay, this amount of money sways them from an Alabama, or if you want to say Ohio State or Michigan, whichever schools you want to use that put into that.
You're right. And you can't talk modern recruiting or college football championships without being competitive in NIL. Marcus Freeman's on the record saying if the deciding factor is going to be the NIL and the raw amount, even in the transfer portal, if that's going to be the deciding factor, Notre Dame's probably not the place for them. They still expect. He also has said, if you're looking for NIL, you'll make as much at Notre Dame as you would at most other places, or he'll say any other place. I would say more likely that's, especially as it evolves and you're seeing, what 20 point, if it ends up being the 20.5 million, but that's just the first step in it. Notre Dame will meet all that. Pete Bavacqua was on the record, the AD, saying that Notre Dame will fully fund And then I could see where, football is going to be first among equals here, first, second, third, and fourth among equals, even with, great lacrosse here, great women's basketball history, men's basketball trying to get back to it. But football rose the boat. But it's not going to be oil man money, even though there's great, like I say, billionaires have come through here, have been educated here. There's certainly a willingness to get these guys connected in the community, to actually have some, to use your social media presence, to use your good works to earn some of the NIL that may come your way. But you're right, these things have become quickly 7-figure and in some places 8-figure. I don't know that Notre Dame will be getting to 8 figures for an individual player anytime soon, the way some other places reportedly are. But all of that is to say that they're not blind to the fact that a financial component needs to be there. If you look at the EA Sports cover, just came out today, Jeremiah Love is quite pleased from his tweeting with being front and center right there near Reggie Bush, and Marcus Freeman looking right over Love's shoulder. That was not a volunteer visit to the Rose Bowl. So that's the kind of thing that happens when you hurdle people on national TV, and you get paid a little more the next year. And he's a Heisman candidate for a reason. Going to be hard to get there with Jadarian Price in the same backfield, and they're not looking to max out Jeremiah Love's carries per carry. Yeah, he's pretty good. And NIL dollar per carry, he'll be, if you do it that way, he'll be right up there with anybody this year. But NIL, Notre Dame, that it's a piece of the conversation. But even on the portal, it doesn't seem that it's driving the conversation, if that makes sense.
So you mentioned Jeremiah Love, you mentioned this offense, and I want to kind of jump into the offensive room here because there's a lot of intrigue around the quarterback room. Are we safe to assume that it'll be CJ Carr as the starter this year? And if so, how does the offense evolve with him at the helm compared to what we've seen in recent seasons for this offense?
It's going to be a competition. I think the smart money would be on CJ Carr if his elbow stays where it was at all spring. He did have a problem last year where he was shut down for multiple months with a throwing elbow injury. Did not require surgery, was back throwing it around a little bit in December and January, but looked great in the spring. Kenny Minchey can do a lot of things as well and has extra year in the program. There have been offensive coordinator changes along the way. This is year 2 of Mike Denbrock. So Minchey and Carr have had the same amount of time around Mike Denbrock with his offense. But I wouldn't say fait accompli that it goes right to Carr, because they want to see how these guys look for the rest of the summer on the unofficial stuff. And then once fall camp starts, July 31st or so, they'll give it a couple of weeks. I have to believe that CJ Carr, it would feel like he has a gut feeling. It feels like he's got a narrow lead on this because he had the reputation coming in. He's got the arm talent and the accuracy that you're looking for. He's got a little mobility to him. He's certain, but there's so many other things where Minchie's right there with him, and the ability to process the offense and decision making. And I wouldn't overstate, though, the idea that Minchie is somehow a way better runner or anything close to Riley Leonard. That's not the case. Minchie actually probably has more raw arm strength, but as an escapability, Carr and Minchie probably closer than you would expect. And Minchie, in terms of grasp of the offense, Minchie actually, with that extra year of college ball, had to learn the Jared Parker version of things. 1 year learned under Sam Hartman, learned under Riley Leonard. I think that's a coin flip. So I think we're going to watch closely those first couple of weeks of August. I don't think they want it to go too far into August, but it's not over before it started. No.
2024 class, Bryce Young being your biggest recruit, if I'm not mistaken, of that class. Are we going to see him this season? And what I mean by that is he a starter? Has there been any talk about him being a starter? I took a look at the projected depth chart, and they still have him second string. I'm not sure if you know anything about any of the development or what may have happened. Maybe there's a setback with an injury, or are you just expecting him to just gradually come along?
They brought in some help on the interior of the defensive line, but they have guys at what they call their Viper position. That's not Bryce Young. He'll be the big defensive end. But I don't care how they list it. They're gonna come at you in waves. There'll be a first string group. There'll be a second string group that gets a couple series. There'll be a third string group you might see here and there. But Bryce Young's talent flashed enough last year on special teams as well, where he was a menace, blocking kicks, blocking punts, running downhill and knocking over two people on one kickoff coverage rep. To say what, and the wingspan, the DNA, the football knowledge is there from a Hall of Fame dad. We saw in the spring, he was already blowing things up the little bit that we got to see. Bryce Young, they don't want to put pressure on him. Of course, it's just his second year of college football, and he was lightly used on defense last year. But even then, he's going to make, you lose the guys that they've lost here in recent years, they're going to have a need for him, and he's the one with so much upside. I mean, what the things his teammates say about him are the kind that really starts to tell you, and then the smile that Al Washington has on his face when the name Bryce Young's brought up. But they have other guys who will be able to get after it. I'm more concerned about what their replacement of Howard Cross and Riley Mills would be like against the run, because they weren't great against the run last year for the most part, not to the level that they were now 2 straight years leading the country in defensive pass efficiency allowed. Mike Mickens' secondary has been off the charts, and I do expect it to be that way again with Leonard Moore and Christian Gray predominantly, and then an Alabama transfer, Devontae Smith, coming in to be the latest slot corner. But keep Carson Hobbs' name in mind too. He's a young guy who's got next, possibly as soon as splitting things with Smith at the nickelback spot. So Bryce Young's really good, and we're expecting him to, if not this year, although I do think he's going to be very important this year, a year from now, there'll be no confusion. He'll be preseason All-America if things progress the way they should.
We talked about the quarterback room, but what can we expect from the wide receiver group this year? Is there anybody that you think stands out as a potential breakout performer?
Well, you saw Jaden Greathouse become uncoverable for stretches in the postseason, especially the Ohio State game. Jordan Faison just finished another double dose of lacrosse and football, but his short area quickness and his built versatility where you can move him outside too. He's excellent. They brought in Virginia's transfer Malachi Fields, who basically had excellent production, almost identical production, 2 straight years for a team with not much on offense. So I would expect Malachi Fields to be a guy who sees the ball a lot, and he'll have to develop a rapport right away with initially 2 different quarterbacks and then get to know even better whoever wins that. But those are the guys initially that you'll see. And then, it's always a question with that group, because it's been a while since anybody's just taken hold and been a stud receiver at Notre Dame. Chase Claypool did it a few years back, but it seems to be like guys pop up for 1 year. Miles Boykin had 1 really good year, and Kevin Austin had 1 really good year. You probably have Fields have 1 really good year, as it's all he'll have here. But Mike Brown continues to recruit and becomes better known for being at Notre Dame now after previous times at Cincinnati and Wisconsin. And he brought in one of his Wisconsin guys as a transfer, Will Pauling. There is hope that they'll be in on these guys and secure these guys that will have that chance to be 3 and 4 year performers at wide receiver. They are looking at the potential for whoever wins this quarterback battle to be a multi-year starter. Odds are that it'll be Carr, just based on reputation and the little we've seen so far. Neither has much game action at all. But that's how you build a passing game, is multi-year familiarity and production.
Now, the offensive line, I think it's safe to say they might lack some depth, but still boast elite top-end talent, maybe one of the best starting groups in the country. How critical is that unit for easing in, like you said, an inexperienced quarterback early in the season, especially with Texas A&M, Miami on the schedule early? How important is that going to be, not just for the running game, but getting that offensive game going for the quarterback and these receivers that you mentioned?
Massively important, and not as much of a question in my mind as some might have thought going into the spring, because they were purposely holding so many guys out, either because they'd had off-season surgery, or in Ashton Craig's situation, he was coming off ACL surgery from last year against Purdue from September on. Really couldn't participate in the spring. Billy Schrouth, the left guard now, he can play either guard spot, but he's gone back to left guard. Didn't play a whole lot in the spring, but Emil Wagner was held out at right tackle, just basically to save his reps, to save the wear and tear after he was a rock solid all last year at right tackle. And Charles Jagusa, if they can keep him healthy, this is a situation where 2 straight years he's dealt with he was coming off a knee problem coming out of high school and only played in the Sun Bowl that one game left tackle back in 23, and then last year had a torn pec and was out after surgery, was unable to play until, by the way, here you go, national championship game, go play left tackle. And he did that. But he's going to be the right guard based on what we saw in spring practice. And then you have Anthony Knapp, who started the first 15 games last year as a freshman. Hurts, his ankle, and he comes back and is popped in back there at left tackle. So it's a group that hasn't played in this formation as this 5 very often, but they're deep enough that you saw Pat Coogan, who became a cult hero with his pregame pep talks, his R and X-rated pep talks, now at Indiana. Rocco Spindler, multi-year contributor and starter, goes on to Nebraska, and it's just like they kind of saw the writing on the wall, even as returning starters, multi-year contributors, potential captains in both cases, and they look around that offensive line room and they see, well, these guys are going to be hard to hold off. Joe Rudolph has it rolling. This is his 3rd year as the offensive line coach, 4th year, and after Harry Hiestand for a year, and he loves this group.
I want to ask a 2-part question. And ending up in the national championship game from where your beginning of the season projection was, and then also, second part to that question, now that we're going into the new season, your projection for the new season.
What was my projection last year?
Yeah.
Going into the year?
Yeah.
I had them playing Georgia in the national semifinal. I thought Notre Dame would end up number 4 in the country and lose one regular season game and then lose to Georgia in the semifinal. Now, thankfully, you didn't ask me what the projection was after the Northern Illinois game. The door was still open, but they needed so much help. But that's another amazing turnaround there and an ability to just hit reset. They found the reset button, and that became epic. But this year, I'm not ready to reveal that. I'm not in a spot to do that. I don't have to deadline as you guys experienced by the time I checked in tonight with you. I always said take as much time as I possibly have. So I'm going to wait, but it sure feels like preseason poll will have Notre Dame in the top 5, if not in the top 2 or 3. Feels that way, even with an uncertainty at quarterback, because you have great weapons in the running backs room. We didn't even talk about guys who could be starting elsewhere behind those 2. And it's impressive they're able to this point to keep them here, because Aeneas Williams could go to a lot of places and be the lead dog. And Kedron Young could go to a lot of places and get a lot of carries, and I don't think we're going to see much of him. But prediction right now, no prediction yet, but it's trending very well. What happens when you turn things around like that and you reel off 13 wins and you even have Ohio State a little worried about blowing that lead in the second half, is that does carry over. I have to believe the credibility, the institutional, there's guys back from that team, plenty of guys back from that team. And even though Riley Leonard no longer here, and even though Howard Cross and Riley Mills are gone, and Jack Kaiser, huge loss, the way they each generation coaches the guys coming up behind them, the mentorship, the fact that Drake Bowen was right there in Jack Kaiser's pocket and also played plenty of snaps, and now he takes over the green dot helmet. Should be, is he Jack Kaiser game knowledge wise? No, there's probably a little gap there, but does he have more upside physically and just measurables? Probably. And so a guy like Drake Bowen, a guy like KVA, Liamuasa, they're going to become the next linebacker monsters for Max Bulla. So here's the question, though. Is there any way a one-loss team, Notre Dame team, could be one of the top 4 seeds and get the bye? Does Notre Dame have to run the table to get a bye? It was, on paper, it was the number 5 seed last year, could have been, or it was number 5 ranked, and then they got bumped down because of the system. But best to try to go 12-0 and get one of those top four, and then you only have to win three. But Notre Dame fans have been complaining, worrying, wondering why they would have to win four, kind of almost resigned to a fate on a 12-team playoff that they'd have to win four every year automatically to win a national title if they haven't since 1988. And yet, after 1 year of that, it's like, oh no, just kidding. We're going to do it this way now, and three might do it if you can avoid stubbing your toe during the season. But to go back to your earlier question, all the more reason why the road to another title as an independent remains open.
Yeah, you recently wrote about that, in Notre Dame having scored its first win of 2025 off the field with the college football playoff announcement. And I think it does certainly help their chances there. And when you've got, for my money, the best coach in the country, they have a ton of returning talent and obviously some new talent coming in as well. I think expectations should be sky high for this program, and very exciting time for Notre Dame fans. Guys, once again, we've been really excited to have Mike Berardino, Notre Dame beat writer for the South Bend Tribune and IndyInsider.com. Be sure to check out his work there. And he also is a co-host of the Pod of Gold podcast. Mike, great stuff on Notre Dame tonight. Thank you so much for your time.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.